So, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Peter. This is Literary Fiction, the place where we do not have the brains for literary fiction. Welcome to another week, another video. I'm back again. And today we're gonna be discussing my reading history. It's a deep dive, guys. Are you ready? So we'll be reviewing all the books that I have read since I started documenting them on my Goodreads app since 2014 until 2024, like a 10-year history lesson. Let's just say that. And I think let's just jump right into the video. So, first year of me discovering books. A young boy in a small village full of hopes to discover brand new worlds and characters and magic and everything. The first year that I used Goodreads was 2014. I discovered it through the other booktubers that were using the app. I was not familiar with it, but I joined in. The very first reading goal that I had set for myself was to read 30 books, which is not that many, but to me it was, and it still is, a big goal because, as I said, I'm not a very fast reader. So out of the 30 books I had told myself to read, I managed to read only 22 books. So it was a big fail. My top favorite book of that year was The Hunger Games. Big surprise. I was really into dystopian books that year. I read all the popular books that everyone read at that period of time. Like, I read The Hunger Games, Divergent, Legend, Their Darkest Minds, all the series that everyone read. And of course, The Hunger Games was my favorite. Now, the least favorite book that I read was my first ever DNF. And until today, I don't think that I have DNF'd another book. And that book for me was The Coldest Girl in Cold Town by Holly Black. I did not really care for that book. Guys, I don't even remember what it's about, honestly. I just remember being about vampires, and it took place in a very short period of time, like within a day. And I remember reaching page 100 and nothing really had happened, so I closed it and never opened it again. Let's go to 2015. In 2015, I decided to lower my expectations, so I decided to read 20 books, and I managed to read only 14. So 2015, also a big fail. Aside from the reading challenge, I set up myself for another big failure because this was the year that I decided to participate in Booktubeathon, which was a very big event at the time. It was like a readathon where people tried to read 7 books within 7 days. Yeah, it's hard. There were these prompts, and you had to find a book that matches each prompt, and you shared your TBR for the readathon with everyone, and you gave daily updates. So as a kid, I decided to join in. I posted my TBR on Instagram, even though no one cared about books, on my personal Instagram account. And I was very excited. I started the first day reading for hours. I read the entirety of Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor, and then I read nothing else for weeks. And if you ask me now, and if you asked me even back then, I would have no idea what the book was about. Like, I read the entire thing and I had no recollection of whatever happened in that book. I don't remember even a character trait. I just remember that the main character has blue hair. That's all I remember. Anyway, apart from that, I did not specifically pick out any favorite book of that year because, yes, I did have some amazing reads, but nothing stood out really. But if I had to pick one, that would be The Mark of Athena from The Blood of Olympus. It was a very fun read. But again, I do not consider it to be one of my favorite books of all time. As for my least favorite book, I chose In the Afterlight, the third book in the Darkest Minds trilogy, which wasn't actually a bad book, but it was very, very disappointing because I had loved The Darkest Minds and Never Fade. They were two of my favorite books prior to that year. So I anticipated the release of that one, and I remember reading and reading and reading, and it felt like I was reading for hours and only 10 pages had been read. So it felt like an endless book. So this is why it was a bit disappointing for me. Now let's move on to the next year, which was 2016. And I'm glad to say that 2016 was a big success reading goal-wise, because I had set myself up to read 20 books, and I managed to read 29. Yeah, that's right. I surpassed my goal, but wait. Not 29 exactly. 10 of them were actually short stories that I actually rated individually. It is a cheat, so if we take the 10 stories and put them into one book, that makes it 20, so it's still a success. These stories were actually part of the Shadowhunter Academy book short story collection by Cassandra Clare, which was really good, but it counts as one. So I read 20 books, which, okay, it was my first time winning the Reading Gold Challenge, so I'm content with that. This was also the year that I first discovered audiobooks. Before that, I had not listened to any audiobook, but I started listening to them or while walking, while I do other stuff. I constantly listen to audiobooks, so it helped the process of me achieving my reading goal. My favorite book of 2016 was An Ember in the Ashes, which was one of the first books, apart from the very popular ones, that booktube made me read, and I'm so glad that it did, because I remember not being able to put that book down. Like, every end of the chapter was a plot twist. It made me want to keep reading, and these characters were just so compelling, and it felt amazing to be in their heads and deal with all their struggles and their internal battles. It was just an amazing experience reading that book, and of course the rest of the books in the series were just as amazing. And my least favorite book of that year, I think, if I had to pick one, because I did not have any bad reads on that year, but if I have to pick one, that would have to be Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. It's not that I didn't like it, but it felt kind of short. I wanted more from the story. I wanted more depth from the characters, and I just didn't get it. And honestly, it didn't seem very original as a concept, and so I didn't like it. And I didn't even pick up the next book from the series, so yeah. Also, one important thing that I failed to mention is that 2016 was the year that a book was stolen from me. Not a book, a graphic novel, but it's the same. Like, I was talking with a friend, and I said to him, I purchased my first graphic novel, Saga Volume 1. If you remember, Saga was very popular back then. And he was like, oh, should I read it if you liked it that much? And I was like, yeah, of course, let me pull up my book lending contract real quick. And he was like, no, it's not necessary. You don't have anything to be afraid of. I will give it back to you as soon as I read it. And I was like, okay, you can have it. It's a graphic novel, so you need only a day to finish it, and then I would have it back. And then days turned to weeks, and he moved to the UK, and since then, my Saga copies in the UK. So if you're watching this, please return my Saga copy and the Parthenon marbles. Now let's move on to 2017, and it goes downhill from here because I started uni at the end of 2016. So I had to move cities, I had a brand new start, and I had to make new friends, and it was a very challenging period for me. And my reading habits were extinct. Like, I did not read at all. My reading goal for 2017 was 20 books, and I read 3. I know it's a complete fail, and I did not even read something that I really loved. The 3 books that I read were the Bronze Key, one book from the Magisterium series by Cassandra Clare and Holly Black, The Lord of Shadows, which I liked, by Cassandra Clare, and I read The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, I think, which was not great for me. I didn't like that series. So yeah, not favorites, not least favorites, but a complete fail. Now let's move on to 2018. I lowered my reading goal from 20 to 10 books because I knew I wasn't gonna read that many books that year as well. So out of 10 books, I read 2. Yeah, all year I just read 2 books. And these books were Simon and the Homo Sapiens Agenda and Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. Both of them I liked, but they did not push me to read any other books that year. So yeah, this year, 2018, a complete fail. Now let's move on to 2019, which is the most disastrous year for my reading. Like the previous year, I lowered my expectations even more. So I had set the brilliant reading goal of 3 books. Yeah, 3 books. And out of them, I read only 1. A moment of silence. That book was Wonder by R.J. Palacio. At least it was a good read. I'm glad that since I read only 1 book, that was the book that I read. Moving on to 2020, which marks the year that I started reading again. Not that much, but it goes up from here. So in 2020, I had set myself up for 12 books, 1 book per month, which was achievable in my head. And it was, because I managed to read 12 books exactly, not 1 more. I remember really enjoying the books that I read that year. I discovered 2 of my favorite series that I still really like, and I cannot choose between the 2, so I will mention them both as my favorite books. First is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. I really adored that book, but overall I like the series, but the first book was really up there for me. And the other book that I read and really loved was Scythe. I cannot put into words how much I loved that book and the message that it conveyed. I remember thinking that if a book can have that effect on me, maybe my book can have an effect on another person, and it motivated me to start thinking about writing again. So I'm really grateful for that. And my least favorite book of that year was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I didn't really care for any of the characters. I really didn't like the story, and this is why I haven't picked up the rest of the books. I think he just announced another book in the series, and although of course I'm happy that he does and people enjoy it, and I think the message he wants to put through is very important, this wasn't for me. Sorry if that offends you, sorry if that is your favorite book, but it wasn't for me. 2020 was also another great year because Christine from Poland Bananas Books published her first book, Again But Better. I pre-ordered it as soon as it was available, and I read it as soon as it arrived. I was so happy for her because I had been following her writing journey since she started making the videos, and I really loved that book. It was amazing, and it really gave me hope about my writing and my book being published in the future. So yeah. Now let's move on to 2021, which marks the COVID-19 period. which in my case really helped my reading because I had more time to do it. That was the year that Ariel Bissett chose the Goodreads Reading Challenge. It was an amazing moment for booktubers because Ariel Bissett was predicting the Goodreads Reading Challenge color every year with such passion, and it was really fun to watch her videos. And once it was announced that she was gonna pick it, it made me really happy. So that year I decided that I was going to read 25 books, and I read 29, which was a success. My favorite book, I couldn't decide on one because I read some amazing books that year. I read The Book Thief, I read Six of Crows, I read The Silent Patient, and Anxious People. These four were my top favorites, and I couldn't just pick one of them. If I had to, I would pick The Book Thief because I really loved the writing style, and the story was so compelling and so devastating and beautiful at the same moment. Yeah, The Book Thief, let's just say that. And as for my least favorite book, I would have to say This Is How You Lose the Time War. I really hated that book. It put me in a reading slump, and it's very short. I bought that book as a gift to one of my friends. I decided to read it before giving it to her, and I wanted to do highlights and comments I thought she would find funny, and I started doing it, and when I was halfway through, I just got bored with the story. I didn't care for it, and yeah, I ended up reading it, giving it to her, and I think she read it and she didn't like it. I don't know. We did not talk about it again. Now let's go to 2022, which was the year that I started my creative writing seminars, and I started reading everything more as a writer than a reader, and I found it hard to actually enjoy it because I was looking at everything very, very critically, which was a gift and a curse. So I set myself the goal of reading 25 books, and I managed to read only 9. Another big fail, I know. The book that I loved the most was The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I loved that book. The cozy feeling that it gave me, all the kids with their powers, and the relationship between the main characters. It was really heartwarming to read and inspiring to read. As for my least favorite book was probably Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. I didn't care for the story. It was very, very boring to me, even though it was a very fast read because it isn't this long and the font was big. So I kept turning the pages and I found nothing that I enjoyed. Yeah, that was my least favorite book of 2022. Moving on to 2023. Now, this was an amazing reading year for me. Even though I didn't read that many books as other people do, I set myself to read 25 books, and I read 25 books, and most of them were amazing. So many 5-star reads. This was the year that I discovered Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I loved all of her books. I picked The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which was my favorite book of the year. And as soon as I finished it, I ordered Malibu Rising, Carrie Soto is Back, and Daisy Jones and the Six. And I read all of them back to back, and I loved every single one of them. And I do have some honorable mentions for this year because I just couldn't not include them in the video. I loved All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. It was a devastating read. It actually made me so sad reading that book, but it was so well written and so... I just don't have the words for it. And the other one is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, which was one of the most beautifully written books that I have ever read. The prose was so beautiful, so lyrical. I don't have the words for it again. It's an amazing read. If you have not read it, because I know it's not that popular, I highly suggest that you pick it up, The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. Don't forget it. As for my least favorite book, that would have to be Five Survive. I didn't really care for that book. It felt dumb. I didn't like any of the characters and the story was predictable. So yeah, even though it seemed very exciting as an idea, its execution was not that good. And lastly, 2024, last year, was also an amazing reading year for me. I started very strong. I believed that I could read 50 books, even though I had never done that before. So I set myself to read 50 books, which later became 40 books. And in the end, I managed to read only 36 books. But it's okay. It's not a big fail. It is a fail, but not a big one. So my top favorite book of last year, as I said in my previous video, was When the World Tips Over by Jandy Nelson. I cannot recommend it enough. If you haven't picked it up yet, please go ahead and purchase it. You will not regret it. Jandy Nelson has a way of exploring family history and family relationships so well that you will forget that these are not real characters, and you will feel bad for them, and you will be happy for them, and you will feel everything for these characters. It's such a wholesome story. Go read it. My least favorite book of the year was The Locked Door by Frida McFadden. I read many books from that author and they are really hit or miss for me because I either love them or I hate them. And The Locked Door was an example of maybe the worst book that I have ever read. It was that bad. It was stupid beyond compare. And don't get me wrong, I like a stupid book when its purpose is to be stupid, but I'm not sure if that book was meant to be stupid, but it was. Yeah, I hated it. Don't pick it up. So anyway, we have reached the end of yet another video, and I promise there are a lot more to come. This is my reading history. It was exciting for me to look back and see how my tastes have changed. There are some books that I still love. There are some books that I have completely forgotten everything about, and some of them I want to read again, some of them not so much. I hope you have received some good book recommendations and some good warnings about a few books. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate your support. Please subscribe to my channel because it will really help me. Click the bell icon so you can get notified about when I post new videos. I promise there will be another video next Friday. I'm not sure what that will be yet, but hey, that's a future me problem. So thank you again for watching. Goodbye.